Good afternoon everyone, my name is Miriam and my group and I will be discussing the Leeds Teaching Hospital versus A and Others case which occurred in 2003. We have chosen this case as it was powerful in the world of law as it has defined the legislation of the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act 1990 and the European Convention of Human Rights, which will be discussed in further detail. We will also be discussing the background of this case, what the judgment was and how the case clarified the meaning of consent. We have used sources such as Westlaw, online journals and books.
So now moving on to, let me start that bit again. My name's Khadija, now we're going to move on to the background. So basically, Mr and Mrs A and Mr and Mrs B both attended a clinic run by the NHS Trust. In both cases, the wife of each, I'm going to start that again. So my name's Khadija and now we're going to move on to the background. So Mr and Mrs A and Mr and Mrs B attended the clinic using the eggs of the wife in each case and the sperm of the husband in each case. Mr Lee, giving evidence for the NHS Trust in his post witness statement on the 18th of November 2002, stated that Mrs A consented to her eggs being used and mixed with her husband's sperm. She did not agree to her eggs being mixed with named or anonymous donor sperm. She agreed to the placing of not more than 2 resulting embryos in her uterus. She refused to consent to her eggs or embryos being used in treating others. Mr A agreed to his wife's treatment and confirmed his understanding that he would be the father of any resulting child. He agreed to his sperm being used to treat his wife. He refused to consent to it being used to treat others for research. He consented to his sperm being used to fertilise his wife's eggs into the uterus, developed from these eggs being used in the treatment of himself together with our named partner, which was his wife. He did agree to them being used in any project of research. So now Mr B. Mr B consented to her eggs being mixed with her husband's sperm and 2 resulting embryos being placed in her uterus. She did not agree to her eggs being mixed with donor sperm and did not agree to any embryos being used for any research purpose. Whereas Mr B consented to his wife's treatment and he understood that he would be the father of any resulting child. He did agree to his sperm being used to treat his wife, and he also agreed, he clearly refused to consent to his sperm being used in treating others or any kind of medical research project. So what happened was, by mistake, the sperm, Mr B's sperms were injected into the eggs, was injected into Mrs A. She became pregnant with the twins, of whom she is the genetic mother and Mr B is the genetic father. None of the 4 parties involved agreed to any of this. So both Mr and Mrs A are white, and in result the twins that she delivered were of mixed race.
Hi, my name is Shireen and I will be talking about the legislation which surrounded this case. Section 28 of the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act of 1990 applies in the case of a child who is being or has been carried by a woman as the result of the placing in her of an embryo or sperm and eggs or her artificial insemination. Section 28.2 relates to if at the time of the placing in her of the embryo or the sperm and eggs, or of her insemination the woman was party to a marriage, and B, the creation of the embryo carried by her was not brought about with the sperm of the other party to the marriage, then the other party to the marriage will be considered the father, unless proven that he did not authorise the placing of the embryo to take place. If no man is treated, then by virtue of subsection 2, the father of the child, the embryo or the sperm and eggs were placed in the woman, or she was artificially inseminated, and the course of treatment is provided for her and a woman together by a person to whom a license applies. The creation of the embryo carried by her was not brought about with the sperm of that man. Therefore, that man shall be treated as the father of the child. If these apply, then Mr. B will be the legal father, and if these do not apply, then Mr. A will be considered the father. The Children Act of 1989. Where a child's father and mother were not married to each other at the time of birth, the father shall have parental responsibility for the child if he has acquired it. Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights states that it was concluded that neither marriage or living together was any reason to say that they couldn't have family ties. Both Mr. and Mrs. B had a right to respect for family life.
Hi, my name is Absa. So this case was brought before the High Court of the Family Division, and the final judgment was ruled on the 23rd February 2003. The main issue of this case was to establish legal parentage of the twins. The embryo that was placed in Mr. A's wife was not the one that Mrs. A had agreed to, as a different sperm was used to create the embryo. The embryo that was created as a result was not the one that Mr. and Mrs. A had agreed to. Section 28(2) of the Human Fertilization and Embryology Act 1990 did not apply, and neither did Section 28(3), as the law had been developed since the case. The court therefore ruled that Mr. A was legally not the father of the twins. It was clear that Mr. B's rights were not spoken for under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights compared to Mr. and Mrs. A's rights. The court's understanding of the Act had interfered with those rights, as Mr. A was assumed not to be the father. Nevertheless, that interference was in line with the law, and the one legal remedy that was available was adoption. The twins' rights were protected under Article 8. Ms. Parker QC, who represented Mr. and Mrs. B, stated that Sections 28(2) and 3 did not apply, and that Mr. B was the legal father. The decision was supported by the Secretary of State for Development, for the Department of Health, the Human Fertility Embryology Authority, and by the official solicitor representing the twins. On the other hand, Ms. Hamilton, who represented Mr. and Mrs. A, stated that Section 28(4) and Section 29 did apply, which made Mr. A the legal father, and she was supported by the Leeds Teaching Hospital NHS Trust. Mr. Graham, who was the advocate to the court, considered all the submissions made by each of the parties and eventually submitted to the court that Section 28 did not apply to this case. As a result, Mr. B was ruled the legal father of the twins, but it was agreed that they continued to live with Mr. and Mrs. A.
Next we'll be talking about institutional writers. Rebecca Opie states in her family law journal that this case was useful in clarifying and explaining the following. The use of DNA testing if the courts consider it in the child's best interest. Increasing contact between adopted children and their natural parents, and the right of unmarried fathers to be notified of adoption proceedings. Disclosure of non-identifying donor information to whose children conceived via assisted reproduction, and the extent to which the European Convention on Human Rights 1950 Article 8 is engaged in the child's right to know their parents. Barbara Hewson states in her family law journal that this case considers the issue raised by the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act of 1990, Section 28.2 and 28.3, which relate to the provision of treatment to married women and the need for consent from sperm donors that their sperm is being used to create the embryos. It also considers the right to respect for family and private life under the European Convention on Human Rights, 1950, Article 8.
Okay, so I'm Naya, and I'm going to be talking about consent and how this case helped to clarify the meaning of consent. So Part 5 of the Code of Practice, which was taken into consideration for the ruling of this case, stated the requirement of consent and the concept of legal fatherhood within the Human Fertilisation and Embryology 1990 Act. Part 5 specifically states consent of the husband or male partner and legal fatherhood. A woman's husband will be considered the legal father of the child who is born as a result of an IVF treatment by the use of donated sperm, unless they are judicially separated or if he can prove that he did not consent to the treatment at all. If a married woman decides to undergo this treatment, then centres that are doing this treatment for them should explain the position that her husband would hold and make sure that the husband has consented to any consequences and the procedure itself. If a woman is being treated with her male partner and she is unmarried or judicially separated, or her husband does not consent to the treatment, then her male partner will be considered the legal father to any resulting child from the treatment, and centres should make sure that they explain this and they should record whether the man was present during the appointment. The most vital principle that was found in the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act 1990 was the welfare of any child born. The most important principle that was found in the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act 1990 was the welfare of any child born by treatment under the